What if the whispers you hear at night weren't just in your head? Not echoes from the storm, not the wooden frame of the house shifting, not imagination. What if those faint words were directed at you, meant to be heard, meant to be remembered? Picture the room, the curtains pulled tight against a restless night, the window trembling faintly as rain strikes the glass, a clock ticking somewhere close, its rhythm steady enough to be trusted. At first, it feels safe. The storm becomes a kind of lullaby, a background you could sink into. But then, it changes. The sound of rain starts to separate into layers, one heavy and constant, the other scattered and uneven, as if someone is moving outside in the downpour. Each drop becomes harder to place, as though footsteps are hiding inside the rhythm. And then, beneath the storm, something softer appears. A tone, a breath, the trace of a syllable forming. It's quiet, almost shy, but it waits for you to notice. And when you do, the realization is instant. That wasn't the storm. That wasn't the house. It was a voice. Stories like this have been collected for years. Accounts from people who swore they heard words threaded into ordinary sounds. Accounts dismissed as dreams, fatigue, or tricks of the mind. But those who heard them all described the same progression. The shift from comfort to unease. The certainty that something unseen is addressing you directly. What begins as curiosity becomes focus. The harder you listen, the clearer it gets, until it no longer blends with the rain at all. Until you know without question, there is someone else here, someone who should not be. Tonight's tape uncovers one such account. One storm, one room, one night when sleep gave way to awareness. And awareness gave way to something that could never be explained away. This is not a legend, not a campfire story. It is a record, and once you hear it, it will be yours to carry too. The account begins with a single figure, alone. The storm had been forecast all week, but no warning could match the weight of it pressing down that night. The house stood at the edge of a quiet street, lights dimmed to save power, walls breathing with the wind. Inside, the details seemed ordinary at first. A faucet in the kitchen that never sealed completely, letting one drop at a time fall into the basin. A wooden clock in the hallway marking each second with a dull, hollow click. A window pane trembling as the rain gathered strength. These were familiar sounds, household rhythms, until they weren't. The air carried a dampness that clung to the walls. The floorboards absorbed it, swollen just enough to groan when weight shifted across them. A draft moved through the corridor, cool against the skin, as though a window had been left ajar somewhere, though every latch had been checked. Power faltered more than once. The lamps flickered not with the randomness of faulty wiring, but with a rhythm. Off, then on, then dim, as if following the breath of the storm outside. In those brief moments of darkness, the house revealed shapes that shouldn't have been there. The outline of a figure where no furniture stood. The suggestion of movement at the far end of the hallway, gone by the time the light returned. She told herself it was nothing. That shadows stretch when light stumbles. That sound is different when it collides with rain. Yet unease works quietly, building not in grand gestures but in subtle shifts. The faucet seemed louder now, the clock slower, the draft colder. Each detail adjusting itself, as if responding to her awareness. And then there was the silence. A pause between thunderclaps when the storm withheld its voice. In that silence, the house felt alert, listening, waiting. Every surface holding its breath. This is where her account begins. Alone in a space she thought she understood, surrounded by ordinary details that no longer felt like her own. Every creak of the walls, every flicker of the lights, every breath of cold air was no longer background. It was participation. And the question that kept pressing in was not what is happening outside, but what has been let inside. She kept telling herself it was the storm. Storms make the air heavy. They bend houses. They trick the senses. That was the explanation she clung to, until she noticed the first detail that refused to be explained. The back door was unlocked. She remembered turning the bolt before the rain began. It was a habit, a ritual carried out without fail. Yet when she passed the kitchen, She saw it swaying gently against the frame, rain pressing inward as if invited. She closed it, this time checking twice, her fingers lingering on the metal, forcing herself to believe it had been her oversight. But as she turned, another detail broke her confidence. A chair in the dining room, one that always stood tucked neatly under the table, now sat pulled out into the room, just slightly, just enough to suggest someone had been there. She stared, measuring every possibility. Had she brushed against it earlier? Had she forgotten? Memory was supposed to provide certainty, but all it gave her now was doubt, and doubt is the first shadow the mind casts against itself. The whispers began faintly. At first, they mimicked the storm, slipping between the rhythms of rain against glass. Words indistinct, carried on the hiss of water. She leaned closer, holding her breath, straining to separate them. They weren't random. They weren't scattered. They were layered beneath the rain, paced like sentences. She froze, heart pausing with her breath, listening. The storm pressed louder against the walls, but in the brief silence between gusts, she heard it clearly. A voice. Not above, not below. Inside. Her body answered before her thoughts could. Muscles stiff, eyes drawn to the hallway. Every instinct told her to run, yet her feet remained fixed, as though the house itself had taken hold of them. Minutes passed this way, her mind caught between explanations. Fatigue, imagination, the body's reaction to isolation. That's what she told herself. But each attempt at reason broke the moment she found the next detail out of place. The framed picture in the hallway, tilted slightly, though she hadn't touched it. The lamp in the living room, now unplugged, its cord trailing across the carpet. The faint impression of a handprint on the fogged window pane, on the inside of the glass. She whispered aloud, asking no one in particular, "Am I imagining this?" Her own voice sounded foreign, thinner than she remembered, swallowed quickly by the rain. Then silence. The storm outside stilled for the briefest moment, as if retreating. The only sound left was her breath, shallow and uneven. She turned the corner toward the hallway, and froze. The door at the far end stood open. A door she hadn't opened. A door that should have remained locked. She told herself it was nothing. A storm changes the behavior of a house. The wood swells, the pipes groan, the walls remember every gust of wind. That was the line she repeated to herself, like a shield. It's just the storm. Just the storm. But storms don't leave doors open, and storms don't move furniture. The silence that had settled broke suddenly, this time from above. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the floorboards of the upper level. She froze at the bottom of the stairs, straining to hear. The pattern was unmistakable. Heel, then weight, then wood adjusting under pressure. Someone was walking. Each step came with the same pace as her own heartbeat, as though the two rhythms were tethered together. She whispered again to herself more than to the house. There's no one up there. There can't be. But the sound persisted. 2, 3, 4 steps. Then a pause, long enough for her to hope it was over, before another set began, moving in the opposite direction. The air thickened. The rain still hammered the windows, but its presence was no longer enough to conceal the weight of those steps. Then, without warning, a shrill sound tore through the house. The phone. It rang once, loud, sharp, electric, and then cut to static. She stumbled toward it, grasping the receiver, but the line gave nothing back. No signal, no voice, only a hollow hiss that filled her ear like breath. She set it back down quickly, her hand trembling. The phone rang again. This time, she didn't touch it. Across the room, the lights shuddered. They flickered violently, on and off, each flash carving the walls into shapes that didn't exist in steady light. Shadows leapt across the ceiling, vanishing before she could name them. She covered her face with her hands, whispering the same phrase as if it could bind the walls together. It's just the storm. Just the storm. But the storm had never felt less responsible for what was happening inside. The phone rang again, louder, and again, static. The footsteps returned above her head, faster now. as though whoever walked there knew she was listening. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned slowly toward the staircase. The steps had stopped. The ceiling creaked one last time, and then nothing. Only the rain. Only her breath. And that's when the engagement passes from her to you. What would you do if you heard footsteps in your own home right now? Would you climb the stairs to confront it? Or would you stand frozen, hoping silence would protect you? She made her choice. She didn't move. Not yet. But the house wasn't finished. The lights dimmed again, flickering not with randomness, but with intent. Long, drawn-out pulses. Bright, then dark. Bright, then dark. As though the house itself was breathing in rhythm with her panic. She backed away slowly, keeping her eyes on the staircase, her hands searching blindly for the edge of the wall. The phone rang again, louder this time, not as if calling for her, but as if calling through her. When she turned back, the receiver lay off the hook, swinging gently. She hadn't touched it. Yet it moved, rocking back and forth as though it had been lifted, then dropped. She dared one step closer and froze. From the speaker buried in the static, a sound pressed through. Not random noise, not interference, a word. Her name. She could no longer pretend the sounds belonged to the storm. Something, or someone, was inside the house. The footsteps had stopped, but the silence they left behind was worse. It was too deliberate, as if whoever made them was waiting. Her eyes drifted to the staircase. Each step loomed in the dim light, shadows pooled in the corners like black water. She hesitated, clutching the banister with both hands, her knuckles pale. The house seemed to inhale with her as she placed one foot on the first step. The rain tapped against the roof, steady, unbroken, a cruel reminder that outside the world went on. Safe, normal. But here, inside, time slowed. Every creak beneath her weight was louder than thunder. She climbed, breath shallow, pausing after each step, straining to hear if the footsteps above would return. They didn't. Instead, the house answered with silence. Thick, oppressive, watching. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched longer than she remembered. Doors stood ajar. Shadows curled inside each frame, inviting and untrustworthy. She took a step forward, then another. Halfway down the hall, she heard it. A faint whirring sound. Mechanical, low, steady, like a machine forgotten in a corner of the dark. She followed it, her body trembling with each step. The sound grew sharper, accompanied by a faint crackle. A voice. Her hand pushed open the nearest door. Inside, the room was empty except for a single object placed on the floor against the far wall. Dust clung to its edges, wires frayed, reels turning slowly. An old tape recorder. It shouldn't have been running. Yet the reels spun with deliberate rhythm, feeding the voice that whispered from its speaker. She froze as she recognized the words. They were hers. The tape described her movements exactly. Each pause, each breath. She takes one step forward. She reaches for the door. She enters the room. Her chest tightened. She glanced around quickly, scanning the corners, expecting someone to be hiding there, narrating her life through this machine. But the room was empty. Only the tape continued, its voice distorted, yet undeniable. She stares at the recorder. She cannot look away. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The voice was ahead of her now, predicting rather than repeating. She will move closer. She will try to touch it. She shook her head violently, stepping back toward the hallway. But the voice adjusted without hesitation. She steps away. She doubts herself. She wonders if she is still awake. Her throat went dry. She whispered, almost pleading, "Stop." The reels slowed for a fraction of a second, as though listening. Then the voice crackled back to life. She begs. She asks for silence. She will not receive it. The lights flickered above her head, shadows breaking across the floor in frantic bursts. She stumbled backward into the hallway, eyes locked on the recorder still humming in the darkness. The voice grew louder, distorted, each word dragging through static. She runs, she hides, she cannot escape the house. She covered her ears, but it didn't help. The voice was no longer confined to the machine. It seemed to seep through the walls, through the ceiling, through her own chest. For the first time since the night began, she realized the storm outside wasn't the problem. The problem was inside. The recorder whirred faster, almost frantic, reels spinning so quickly they blurred. Its voice broke into a harsh, overlapping chant. She knows now. She knows what the house wants. And then, silence. The recorder stopped. The hallway light steadied. For a heartbeat, she thought it was over. She dared a single step forward, her breath catching. And the machine clicked again. The voice returned. Calm. Clear. Closer than before. She turns the corner and freezes. The recorder did not stay quiet for long. Its reels twitched, stuttered, then roared back to life with a violence that rattled the floorboards. The voice no longer whispered her steps. It shouted them, layered over itself, distorted, one echo on top of another until it became unbearable. The thunder outside struck in rhythm with it, each crash timed perfectly, as though the storm itself had become the machine's accomplice. And yet, something was wrong. The thunder didn't roll across the sky anymore. It struck only above her house, pinned like a spotlight in the heavens. She pressed her palms against her ears, but it didn't matter. That was when she heard it. Not through the recorder, not through the storm, but close, too close. Her name, whispered directly into her ear. She spun around, breath catching in her throat, searching the hallway behind her. No one. Just shadows layered against the wallpaper, shifting with the flicker of the light bulb above her head. Her heart pounded. She stepped backward, then froze. At the far end of the hall, the shadows thickened, pulling themselves into a shape. It was not clear. Never clear. It did not have a face, nor features she could describe. It was suggestion, not detail. A smear of blacker darkness standing apart from the rest. And though it did not move, it leaned forward in a way that made her feel unmistakably watched. The doors answered before she could. One slammed shut, then another. Each door down the hall crashed against its frame, louder than the storm itself. The echo traveled like a wave, closer and closer, until the one nearest her snapped shut so violently the glass inside its frame cracked. She ran. Down the stairs, into the living room, breath shallow, pulse ragged. She staggered against the wall, waiting for the silence that usually followed a burst of chaos. But silence did not come. The storm was gone. No thunder, no wind. And yet, the rain remained. She froze, straining to understand. The sound of rainfall was still there, steady, pounding against surfaces. But it no longer came from outside the windows. It was inside. Drops tapped against the ceiling overhead, pattered against the wooden floor beneath her bare feet, trickled down the walls where no water should be. She reached out in disbelief, pressing her hand against the wallpaper. It was wet. The house itself was raining. She backed into the center of the room, trembling, watching as the ceiling darkened with spreading patches, as droplets fell like beads of sweat from the light fixtures. The air thickened with damp, heavy enough to choke her lungs. The recorder's voice pierced through the downpour again, louder, sharper, closer. She cannot run from the rain. The house is awake. The house is listening. The whispers returned with it, circling her head, weaving between the walls. Each one carried her name, sometimes in her voice, sometimes in a voice she almost recognized but could not place. The shadow moved. She saw it just for a moment, a flicker across the room, gone before she could turn her head fully. But the doors slammed again, sealing her in. The rain grew heavier, pounding against her shoulders, dripping into her hair, soaking her clothes. It wasn't cold, it wasn't warm. It was wrong. Water that didn't feel like water, sliding across her skin as though searching for a way in. She screamed into the empty room, voice breaking. "What do you want?" The rain paused for a single breath, as if the house itself considered the question. Then, in the silence, the recorder clicked. It wants her. Thunder cracked, not outside, but from the walls themselves, rattling the glass, shaking the floor. Every light in the house flared bright white, then snapped off in unison, plunging her into blackness. In that blackness, the whispers moved closer. She could hear lips brushing her ear, could feel the weight of a breath against her neck. Her name again, spoken from behind her, spoken from everywhere, spoken from inside her own chest. She stumbled through the dark, soaked to the bone, breath ragged. Every door she tried slammed shut against her. Every window she reached for showed only blackness outside, as though the world beyond the glass no longer existed. She ran to the front door, grasping the handle with both trembling hands. She twisted, pulled, shoved her shoulder against the wood until it rattled in its frame. Locked. She screamed, pounding her fists against it, expecting neighbors, a passerby, anyone to hear. No one came. When she turned back, the house was different. The hallway she had just crossed was gone. In its place stretched the staircase again, exactly as she had first climbed it. The banister gleamed with wetness. The walls shivered with the hum of rain. Her pulse faltered. She backed away, whispering to herself, "No, no, no. I was just here. I came down already. I came down." But the house offered no reassurance. Every step she took only returned her to where she had been before. The living room led to the hall to the stairs back to the landing. It was no longer a house. It was a loop, a circle, a trap with no exit. She stopped in the center of the hall, chest heaving, and listened. The recorder had gone silent, but she knew it hadn't finished. It was waiting. Her eyes fell toward the room where she had first found it. The door stood open, dark, expectant. Slowly, against every instinct to run, she walked back inside. The tape recorder sat exactly where she had left it, reels still, like a predator pretending to sleep. Her hands shook as she reached down, pressing the worn button with her thumb. The reels spun. The voice returned. She tries again. She thinks there is an end. The room chilled. She clutched her arms, fighting the urge to scream, but the tape gave her no space to breathe. She listens. She cannot resist. Her throat tightened. She whispered, "What do you want from me?" The reels answered with static, then resumed, louder. It wants her fear. It wants her voice. The rain hammered harder inside the walls. Water trickled down her cheek, though she could not tell if it was from the storm or her own tears. The tape's voice slowed now, dragging syllables through distortion. She will hear the ending. And then it came. A sound she could not mistake. Her scream. Not the scream she held in her chest now, but one already lived, already captured. A scream that split through the static, raw, desperate, endless. It was her own voice, echoing through the room, through the house, through the rain that now poured from the ceiling like a flood. She fell back, covering her mouth, as if by silencing herself she could erase what the recorder had captured. But the scream only grew louder, layered, repeating, spiraling until it filled every corner of the house. And then, abruptly, silence. The reels stopped. The voice stopped. Only the rain remained, steady, relentless, inside the walls, and beneath it, if one listened carefully enough, the faint crackle of static still waiting on the tape. Waiting for the next recording. The tape falls silent now. The reels no longer move. Her scream has faded. The house is still. But if you listen closely, if you let the rain carry on in your ears, you'll notice it hasn't truly stopped. The static is still there, faint, buried beneath the storm, waiting. The question is not whether this tape has ended. It has. The question is, what happens if it starts again? What would you do if you heard the recorder click awake in your own house tonight? Would you sit and listen? Or would you run, even if the storm outside never ended? Tell me, would you have stayed in the house, or would you have thrown yourself into the dark beyond the door? The rain is steady now. You can rest beneath it if you wish. But remember, rest is never safety. Not here. Not with these tapes. If this story has unsettled you, know this. There are more. Many more. Each one waiting, each one already written, already turning somewhere in the dark. Subscribe, if you dare, because the next tape may already be yours.